constitutional grounds of an impeachment. In a letter to President Trump, Committee Chairman Jerry Nadler invites the president to participate by notifying the committee of who will represent him in the proceedings. Last week, the House Intelligence Committee wrapped up several hearings Democrats say demonstrated President Trump conditioned U.S. military aid on Ukraine, announcing politically motivated investigation.
Fox's Jared Halpin, but the president arrived in Florida for the Thanksgiving holiday at a rally in the Miami area, mocking the Democrats over impeachment.
They don't even know what they're talking about. It's a scam. It's a hoax. The Ukrainian foreign minister stated, and I quote, Ambassador Sondland did not tell us, and certainly did not tell me, about a connection between the assistance and the investigations.
The president predicted the crazy Democrats, as he called them, are going down in a landslide next year. Winter storms are making for tough travel for holiday travelers.
Multiple storms firing up over the course of the next couple of days. The first one already really beginning, now moving across portions of Colorado and stretching up into the plains. Big area of snow right now in this system, and as a result, no surprise here, we've got winter storm watches and warnings stretching all the way from the west coast, running up into the plains, and then getting up into the upper Midwest.
That's Fox meteorologist Adam Klotz. Flight schedules are beginning to return to normal after hundreds of delays on Monday, but with many flights already filled to capacity, airlines say rebooking all the passengers whose flights were canceled could take days. Oakland's International Airport reported back at full operation after a power outage Tuesday evening caused the lights to go out. Installed security checkpoints, cause under investigation. America is listening to Fox News.
Did you know that home loan rates have plunged again? Would you like to take advantage of these lower rates to help lower your monthly payments? Refinancing doesn't have to be for another 30 years. It can be for 10, 15, or 20 years. It's up to you. Reduce your monthly payments. Pay off your loan earlier. At Bank Pacific, where we're open to closing your loan in a hurry.
Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Equal housing lender. Credit conditions apply.
We can't buy this house.
What?
It has 4 bathrooms. Just think of all the bathtub rings, water spots, and stains, plus the cleaning products I'll have to buy.
Didn't I tell you? The house comes with a non-electric Connecticut water treatment system. We'll have clean, soft water throughout the house to protect the water-using appliances, keep the tub, showers, and sinks looking like new, and help our skin, hair, and clothes look and feel great, too. The house even includes a Connecticut drinking water system.
A Connecticut system in the house? We'll take it.
American Water Tech, a passion for improving lives through better water.
Thousands of Californians away from their homes right before the holiday. More wildfires.
The cave fire had burned close to 4,300 acres by midday Tuesday. Los Padres Forest Fire Chief Jim Harris says while Santa Barbara has seen a lot of fire, this particular area has not until now.
This is one of the last slots of old vegetation, and it's something we've all talked about for years and years, like just a nightmare spot of right down the San Marcos Pass where the winds funnel. The last time it burned was 1990.
Wind gusts topped 50 miles an hour in spots fueling the flames. Santa Barbara County's sheriff says more than 5,000 people were evacuated. Rain is in the forecast for later Tuesday, which should help, but too much rain can cause mudslides in burn areas. Jessica Rosenthal, Fox News.
North Aurora, Illinois, outside Chicago, police have arrested school bus driver Michelle Pasley for an open container violation. They say she was swigging a beer while driving a school bus with 30 elementary school kids on board. Yes, she was fired. Police in Florida investigating an online ad offering a newborn baby for sale.
The ad said the baby is 2 weeks old, sleeps, and doesn't make noise at night, and said the seller would provide clothes and formula. It also offered the baby's 4-year-old sister for free. The person who posted the ad also claimed to live in a quiet, influential neighborhood and work for the Florida Department of Children and Families. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement is working to determine if it's a hoax. Lisa Lacera, Fox News.
Thousands of Palestinian protesters took part in a day of rage across the occupied West Bank on Tuesday, some groups clashing with Israeli forces to protest the U.S. announcement that it no longer believes Israeli settlements in the West Bank violate international law. A major tunnel in Hong Kong has reopened as the week-long police siege of a nearby university appears to be winding down, closing one of the more violent chapters of the city's anti-government protest. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Hey, what's that?
A Subway Big Hot Pastrami.
My Big Hot Pastrami?
No, my Subway Big Hot Pastrami. Get your own.
Get your own Subway Big Hot Pastrami. Tender, juicy beef on freshly baked sunflower crunch bread, topped with pickles and mustard. Finish off your meal with all new seasoned potato wedges, baked to perfection right in the restaurant. Both available for limited time only. Subway, make it what you want.
Are you ready for some football? The Ray Gibson Show has got your fix every day with the Points NFL Pick'em contest. Get the latest updates as we check out the past week's performance and break down the upcoming action. Get your game on by calling the hotline at 888-TALK or sound off on Facebook Live at thepoint.gu. League members get a chance to win some awesome weekly prizes with a shot for your choice of a new GTA phone. The NFL Pick'em contest is brought to you by Current Guam with special thanks to GTA. Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. You've heard it before. You're going to keep hearing it so long as I am able to warble into a microphone. Because that's kind of where Tall Tales comes from. We're here at Tall Tales, we, meaning the real Joe Cruz. Are you here, real Joe? Yeah, there's the real Joe Cruz.
Yes, sir.
The real Joe Cruz and I are constitutionalists. We value all of our constitutional rights, and we speak out in favor of them. The real Joe Cruz probably later on in the program will also inform you why an informed and active citizenry is really important when it comes to securing and protecting those rights. Right, real Joe Cruz?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay, so we start out Tall Tales with that portion of the program known as Zemi-Ikotni. Zemi-Ikotni, my backwards bilingual play on words, translated to being meet the press. And as you know, I've got my blue pencil here. I take my blue pencil, I go through the editorials from each of the papers, looking for blunders, mistakes, poor usage, factual inaccuracy, fuzzy thinking, you name it. And when it's over, I do a value judgment and determine which of the two is the better. And the better of the two receives the coveted blue star that I mark with my blue pencil. And as I guess it was yesterday we discussed this, careers have been made and broken based on who gets that blue star. And those who have a keen sense of hearing, who are located in the right parts of the island, if you're downtown by what we used to call the PDN building, the Daily News building, when the Daily News wins the blue star, you can hear the champagne corks popping way out there on West O'Brien Drive. And if it's the Post and you're up in Tamuning where the Post is located, same. Now, alternatively, the paper that doesn't get the blue star, if you listen closely, you can probably hear the editorial boards in those boardrooms breaking out their crying towels and weeping unmercifully because they had their chance and they didn't make it. So the stakes are awfully high here on Meet the Press, Zemi-Ikotni. I don't know if, I haven't checked to see if Gannett's stock on the big board fluctuates in accordance with their performance on Zemi-Ikotni here. I suspect it does. You know, Gannett bought out another company and is now the largest newspaper company in the United States, one of the largest in the world. A frightening thought given the Gannett paper's lackluster performance here on the island. Okay, so let's take a look at the Daily News editorial for today. Now, an editorial we expect to be the product of the editor, the publisher, the editorial page editor, as they sit down and think, as an organization with influence that is really on top of what's going on in our community, what editorial positions do we want to take? What do we want to praise? What do we want to condemn? What do we want to encourage? What do we want to discourage? That's what we look for on an editorial page. It ain't what you get in the Daily News, though. Here's the Daily News today. Another view, Trump's intervention undermines military policy. And this comes from the USA Today network. I can't remember the last time they had an editorial of their own. I guess they're out of the editorial business. Contrary to my advice, it's the only way that local newspapers can really compete with the internet. If you just want the news, there are an abundance of places on the internet where you can get today's news, and you can get a lot of commentary, left, right, centrist, whatever. But the only place that you could get editorial comment on what's going on here on Guam, well, the best place is right here on Tall Tales, because that's exactly what Tall Tales is all about. It's all about an editorial type commentary on what's going on in the island, who's doing what to whom, what should be encouraged, what should be discouraged, what should be condemned, and what should be praised. But I don't have any competition at all from the Daily News because they've dropped out of that game. So today, yeah, and, you know, every single one of their editorials is I suspect they have a team, a brain trust back in Gannett's headquarters in Virginia, who sit down and go and ponder this question every day. Well, how can we bash Trump today? And one gentleman will raise his hand and say, well, we could try. No, we already done that. And then a lady in the other side of the table, why don't we? No, we've done that one twice. So they keep racking their brains to come up for some new way of bashing Trump. Today, it's Trump's intervention undermines military discipline. So they're criticizing Trump because he intervened in the disciplinary process of a Navy chief who was in the SEALs. I can't remember what SEAL stands for. Anyhow, the chief, he was a chief, was convicted in a court-martial, and Trump came along and overruled the court-martial, said he could keep his trident, could keep his membership in the SEALs, etc. And because of that, the Secretary of the Navy was fired by the Secretary of the Navy, by the Secretary of Defense. The reason being that the Secretary of the Navy went behind the Secretary of Defense's back to try to persuade to leave the matter alone. You can't have that in a military organization. You can't have a captain going behind the major's back to the colonel to try to persuade the colonel to do something that the major has said can't be done. And the military discipline is so important. You stop to think about it. The discipline has to be so well understood that you take a situation where one soldier, one SEAL, one Marine, etc., who has command authority over another, orders that Marine to do something that both of them know will cause the death of the Marine. And the Marine can't say, no, I can't do that because I don't want to get, you got to do it. That's the nature of military discipline. So on the one hand, I'm a rule of law guy, and I think the military justice system, for the most part, works pretty well. There are certain similarities to our civil justice systems, certain dissimilarities. There is a court of military appeals, which is stocked with civilians and not military types, and appeal from the Court of Military Appeals goes to the U.S. Supreme Court. So as a general principle, I think that the military discipline system should be left alone. On the other hand, Trump is the commander-in-chief. He is the top soldier, Marine, sailor, airman, whatever. He's the commander-in-chief. And he has a certain amount of authority that is unquestioned when it comes to military matters. So that's what the Daily News editorial from Gannett News Service decided to beat up on Trump about today. I suspect that many of you have formed your own opinions on the matter, and if you'd like to call and discuss those matters, it's 888-8255, 888-TALK. And if you're part of our national listening audience, you got to put a 671 in front of that. And for our international radio listening audience, remember the country code for the United States of America is 1. Okay, then let's take a look at the Post editorial. Let's see if I have it here. Yeah. We are optimistic that Frank Ishizaki, a retired FBI agent and former police chief, will use his experience and training in federal law enforcement to bring meaningful reform to the Department of Corrections. One of the things Ishizaki said after Governor Lulian Guerrero announced his appointment Tuesday is he will find ways to do a better job of corrections. That statement offers hope that Ishizaki has a broader grasp of what the corrections system should be. That, in addition to keeping the public safe from convicted criminals, it's also about offering a path for convicts to reintegrate into society as law-abiding citizens. We're also encouraged that Captain Joe Carbolito has been hired as Deputy Director of Department of Corrections to keep the operational leadership of the prison system. He, based on his operations experience at the police department, should make a good team with Ishizaki. To say the DOC's problems are many is an understatement. Prisoners have escaped, and DOC has taken too long to tell the public about it. Prisoners have been mistakenly released, apparently because of administrative lapses and weak verification system. Some, such as Jonia Mayor Jesse Mendiola Blas, with connections to certain local court marshals, have allegedly had inmates released from the prison. To help fix things, the new DOC leadership is now responsible to staff the prison with enough guards to cover all work shifts and to have those guards properly trained. We also need a DOC leadership that won't allow drugs and other contraband to flow into the prison. The flow fosters lawlessness, feeds prisoners' addictions, threatens the officers, and harms the inmates in our community. In some cases, corrections officers have been involved. The highest ranking of those charged, Jeffrey Limo, then a lieutenant, was the head of DOC's internal affairs when he was arrested. Limo admitted to his participation, although he downplayed his involvement as simply a failure to say something when he knew a crime was being committed. Some of the more serious charges he initially faced were dropped in exchange for his cooperation with prosecutors. The new DOC leadership faces a challenging task of working with the government attorneys and protecting DOC from the attempts before the Civil Service Commission by people like ex-Lieutenant Limo. Limo is seeking to get his job back, even after pleading guilty to official misconduct as a misdemeanor. He had been accused of taking payment in exchange for the release or transfer of inmates. While Limo says he takes full responsibility, his deal-making and his push to return to work at DOC indicate otherwise. These issues are a lot for any leader at DOC to effectively deal with. Ishizaki and Carbolito share two strengths: their experience in law enforcement and the integrity signified by their records of public service. We hope they can reverse the course of DOC and make the prison serve all in our community as well it should. Okay, well, this is an example of an editorial that is talking about something that needs to be talked about. And as is my usual custom, I got to put my 2 cents worth in here too. This reintegration into society is a tough one for prison authorities. I would be happy if prison authorities keep those people who are supposed to be in prison, free from riots, free from lawsuits, to assign them the reintegration into society packet. I think that's a little bit of an overreach. Once upon a time, when I was up for confirmation as the Director of Corrections, I went before the legislature with this particular approach. I said to the senators, I'm sure I know of the 3 things you want me to do while I'm Director of Corrections. Number 1, no escapes. Number 2, no escapes. Number 3, no escapes. And I think that's the primary job of the Director of Corrections. Under the last Director of Corrections, escapes kind of dwindled because it was apparently too easy to get out because of a corrections officer's mistake. And I'm going to put the word mistake in parenthesis. Was this just cover to do Mayor Bloss of Jonia's bidding when he says, I could get people out of jail? So there's an awful lot more there that Frank Ishizaki is not going to be able to tackle. This is a real job for the Attorney General and the Police Department to get to the bottom of the allegations concerning Bloss and some of the other criminal law matters that have plagued the prison during this administration. In any case, there's nothing to do at this point but wish Frank Ishizaki the best of luck, and to give the Guam Daily Post the coveted blue star. Okay, so much for Zemi Ekotny. I've only got 4 items on my table of in my card for today, so it may very well be like yesterday. Well, I'll have to go to some of the default topics in order to keep the show interesting, informative, and educational, which is what you've come to expect from Tall Tales. I think being this close to Thanksgiving has kind of a chilling effect on the news producer. Storm doesn't help at all, but this is what I've got on my card for today. The Tag versus Anonymous, the Attorney General versus the Gura 3, Gura Commissioners versus Stopasnia, and Senator Jim Moylan versus the Gullible. You want to make sure you stay tuned for Jim Moylan versus the Gullible. It borders on humorous. Okay, so starting out, Tag to handle guard anonymous letter complaint. The governor tells KUM she'll let Adjutant General Esther Agagi deal with the concern raised in an anonymous letter from Guam National Guard members for now. The latest anonymous hit, a 6-page letter from soldiers and airmen in the Guam National Guard citing concern with Agagi and her top 2 assistants. If the letter is anonymous, how do you know, KUAM, how do you know that it's from soldiers and airmen? How do you know it's not from some disgruntled former guardsman who has an axe to grind with the Guard and will do everything that he can, or maybe an axe to grind with the Tag, and will do everything that, I was about to say he can, but I've got to change that, everything they can to make life tough for the Adjutant General. I talked about this yesterday when I read the anonymous letter that had been sent to Tall Tales, which if you have a overpowering desire, I'll read portions of it again today. But the media is not doing these people a favor by taking these anonymous letters and giving them the dignity of making them news items. They're not news items. And what they say is if that 6-page letter that is the subject of the news article, if it had been signed by one guardsman, nobody would have paid much attention to it. Well, you know, it's just one guy or one girl. So, yeah, you know, soldiers, the old saying is soldiers in the barracks bitch, and that's true. That's just part of a soldier's job description. But when it's anonymous, all of a sudden it's elevated to the point where we wonder if the Rosetta Stone didn't have a particular section that dealt with the interpretation of anonymous letters. So the media is not doing these folks any favors. Being the director of a organization, whether it's corrections, education, being the adjutant general of the National Guard, is tough. And there are going to be people who are against what the leader does. Regardless of what it is, there will be opposition to it. That's part of the organizational dynamics of any organization. But the the process is not enhanced by having media outlets take what are labeled as anonymous letters and giving them the maximum credibility. Well, you know, there's 6 pages of allegations in there. Are they true? Yeah, they're true. Well, how do you know they're true? Well, because the letter's anonymous. Got to be true. And then I was listening to radio and I heard somebody else on the radio say, well, these letters are undoubtedly anonymous because the author fears retaliation. Well, again, how do you know that? Maybe the author, and it only takes one person to write a letter. I've written a lot of them myself, none of them anonymous. It only takes one person to write a letter. And how many letters is anonymous? 4, 6, 9 letters. It only takes 9 letters on your word process to spell out the word anonymous. So you can put down the most scurrilous group of allegations and at the bottom say, yours truly, anonymous. And the way things are going now, the media will pick that up and say, look what we got here. This is front page news. This is a lead story on our TV station. Not a very good way to do business. It could very well be that the allegations are only an example of what's called axe grinding. Do you know what that means, Real Joe Cruz?
Yeah.
Axe grinding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little bit of a revenge, a little bit of...
Well, there was a time when machine shops would have a large wheel about yay big around, Real Joe Cruz, and you would operate it by pumping a pedal. And you would take your axe and hold the blade of the axe against that rotating stone, and you could sharpen your axe. Axe grinding. Now, why would you want to sharpen your, carrying the figure of speech a little farther, why would you want to sharpen your axe?
To cut.
So you can chop somebody up, right?
Yep.
So these anonymous letters may be nothing more than a couple of people, or maybe one person, engaging in axe grinding. But the message is out there loud and clear. If you want to make it tough on your director, do an anonymous letter and send it to the media. It's going to be a whole lot more effective than if you went through the chain of command and brought your concern up through the chain of command to the director or to the governor or whoever. So that's the way to go. The anonymous letter as a tool of personnel management. So in this particular case, the governor tells KUM she'll let Adjutant General Esther Aggie deal with concerns raised in an anonymous letter from Guam National Guard members for now. The latest anonymous hit, an anonymous hit, a 6-page letter from soldiers and airmen in the Guam National Guard citing concerns with Aggie and her 2 top assistants. The letter was sent to the governor's office, but Governor Lou Leon Guerrero tells us she forwarded it to Aggie. She knows what to do with an anonymous letter. You know, look for cover. I have referred that letter to the Adjutant General, and she has taken it very seriously. Yeah, it worked. And I know that she's meeting with her management staff to address it and to put out strategies on how to respond to it. I could give you an idea about how to respond to it. In fact, I'll give you a demonstration right here on camera if you're watching, okay? Adjutant General Aggie, here's how to respond to that anonymous letter, like this. That would be a fitting response. And you could have a cameraman from KOAM in your office when you did it and explain why you did it that way. The governor also said that while she wishes letter writers would reveal themselves. She wishes. That doesn't mean she is more concerned about who wrote the letters than what's in them. Well, you should be more concerned about who wrote the letters, Governor. You know, if it's as I mentioned, if it's somebody who got kicked out of the Guard for misconduct 2 years ago, you should be concerned about that, because it bears on the credibility of the allegations in the letter. I wish people would, write their names so we can go directly to them, which, of course, is exactly what the Mr. Anonymous doesn't want. But I guess they don't feel comfortable with that. Comfort, of course, is the key word here. So when I read these letters, I do take them seriously, as you have seen with the DOC situation, where Director Sam Brennan was treated to the same anonymous letter. Now, I don't mean to stick up for either Brennan or Aggie. I've been pretty critical of both of them, especially on Aggie's trotting out this, these people who are under indictment for criminal sexual conduct and are still working for the Guard because, they're innocent until proven guilty. I was pretty harder on that. And Brennan for the same reason. But on the other hand, no matter what, no one should have to put up with this anonymous letter thing, which is now encouraged by the governor. Break time coming up? Okay, let's take a break and we'll come back to the tag versus anonymous. And if the real Joe Cruz pleads with me hard enough, I'll read the portions of the anonymous letter I got yesterday.
Hafa Adai Tritons, this is Chelsea St-Nicholas, president of the UOG Alumni Association. I made some of the best memories during my time as a Triton. Because of this, I have committed to giving back to the G is for Giving campaign, which will help student scholarships, programs, and activities. And I encourage you all to do the same. To make a tax-deductible donation, log on to give.uog.edu by December 31st or call 735-2957.
Viva UOG!
'Tis the season to be feasting. Indulge the fun way at Sandalo Club's Donut Dash 2K 5K on Saturday, November 30 at Teasen Complex. Race starts at 6 a.m. There will be cash prizes, and the first 300 finishers get a free coffee mug, perfect for dunking those donuts you will get when you register. The more donuts you eat, the better you'll do. The Donut Dash registration fee is $15. Register online at guamdonutdash.eventbrite.com or call 488-9028. A portion of the proceeds will benefit the Guam Police Department.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by American Water Tech, a passion for improving lives through better water.
We now return to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, soaring over the confusion with his superpowers of truth. Call 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
So I took a peek at Facebook here while I was during the commercial here, and let's see. Of course, there are a lot of well wishes. Tedo says, do you feel that the three whistleblower no names have a formatted pattern and may be done by the same individuals, GVB, DOC, National Guard? Could be, but we'll never find out so long as the media urges us all to take these anonymous letters at face value, as though they were signed before a notary public under oath. James Howard wonders, can we add candid news to the Blue Star competition? Well, I go to Candid News myself, and some interesting things there, especially the way Candid News caught Janella Carrera taking comp time, which is just, it's just almost as laughable as this anonymous letter thing. But as I understand Candid News, it's more investigative and fact-oriented, whereas the Blue Star and the editorial competition goes to opinion. So I don't think that Candid News has that dimension. It serves a purpose as far as factual investigations, but I haven't seen anything that I would identify as opinion on Candid News. If I did, well, I would consider it. The way the Daily News is operating right now with no editorials, with a really weak news production, they're just begging for alternative media to come in here and take over. Alternative media like Candid News. Okay, so back to the tag versus anonymous. Well, the governor met with DOC rank and file and command staff after they penned not one but two anonymous letters. How does she know that? How does KUAM know that? They. Who is they? About prison conditions and issues with former prison director Samantha Brennan, who has since resigned. The MAGA Haga said, she told us she may sit this one out. I've already met with the tag. She wants to work it through. Of course, that would be the first line of responsible action that needs to be taken, and we go there. But if I have to, I will. The Guam National Guard did not release any additional comments about the letters. So, yeah, so there were four. The first one was Pilar Laguana at the Visitors Bureau. Then we had a couple for the prison, one for the National Guard. And let's see, I had another really poignant comment here. Just give me a second to find it. Well, I'll find it during the next break. But what it was, I think it was from James Howard. It said, back in the day, newspapers never ran with anonymous stuff because they couldn't verify the source. And I think that's appropriate. And I can tell you this. Sometimes people will complain about a new director because they don't know how things have always been done in that department. The new director might not know that you can go to the Matai without signing for leave because it's always been that way. And the new director who says, well, yeah, you go to the Matai, you got to sign leave. Whoa, man, that guy, he's anti this and he's anti Chamorro and he doesn't understand. Or some of the other things. In other words, the new director who comes in and has a firm approach to their duties to make sure that the department functions in accordance with the law and its mission, oftentimes is resisted by employees, especially long-term employees, who have kind of carved out their own niche. And they don't want to see somebody else come along and change the rules, so they have to perform like everybody else. So I think this whole anonymous letter thing is really, really irresponsible on the part of the media. Now, did you have a request, Real Joe Cruz?
Yeah, for you to read a portion of the anonymous letter. The
anonymous letter
that was anonymously sent by someone.
Yeah, well, here's an anonymous letter I got yesterday. Dear Bob, I'm a loyal listener to Tall Tales, and I think you do a tremendous job. You're very insightful. You're always correct. You're right on point. You're interesting. You're humorous. I think you are the best talk radio host on the air. I'm not going to sign my name to this anonymous letter, Bob, because I'm afraid that the other talk show hosts would retaliate against me. Your pal, Anonymous.
Wow.
Isn't that a great letter?
That is a great letter.
Yeah.
And
but,
it's true,
the guy doesn't want to he doesn't want to call some other radio talk show host and say, I'm not going to put you on the air.
I have to agree with him, though. You are great on the radio, sir.
Well, sooner or later, the truth will out.
It's
Real
true.
Joe Cruz, right? Okay, well, let's move on until we get the next anonymous letter, right? I suppose that at UOG, the freshman comp course ought to have a few sections on drafting of anonymous letters, since it seems to be such a good way to resolve things, right? Okay, next I've got the Attorney General versus the Gura 3. And it's ran in the Post. What was described as a milestone case more than a year ago has essentially ended with a trio of dismissals. The remaining defendants in the open government case against former board members of the Guam Housing and Urban Renewal Authority have been officially dismissed and their records expunged. That's interesting. The records expunged. Superior Court Judge Anita Sukola granted motions to dismiss John Elau, Deanne Torrey, and Rosie Bloss on Tuesday morning. Their former co-defendants, David Sablon, Roland Selvage, Cecilia Suda, stood trial in October and were acquitted of the charges against them, which stemmed from an alleged illegal meeting in December 2011 and a poll vote conducted in April of 2015. Rachel Pasnia, a former and now current Gura Executive Director, was not called to the witness stand, an action with which he took issue. Torrey, Elau, and Bloss faced similar charges, which the Attorney General chose to dismiss following the trial. The case first broke in 2017 and initially included 7 defendants. Former Gura Executive Director Michael Duenas was the 7th and only defendant to accept a guilty plea, admitting to conspiracy as a misdemeanor. All of the former defendants faced misdemeanor charges, but nearly 50 misdemeanors when the case was filed. Former Chief Prosecutor Joseph McDonald called it a milestone case in early 2018 after Duenas pleaded guilty. Hopefully, this is the first example that shows the Office of Attorney General has decided it's important to have transparency in the running of boards. And so you can see that even though it's a misdemeanor, what they're really interested in is upholding the policy of the law, which is to have transparency. Well, I got to agree with McDonald. And, you know, I don't know any more about the case against the Gura board members than what I read in the paper. I don't have any inside information. I never went to the trials. But if they did, in fact, conduct a poll vote, you can't do that under the open government law. And the same with having meetings where decisions are made that are not properly announced and open to the public. And if there's any portion of the law that I think is essential to good government, it's the open government law and the Sunshine Act. If boards can meet behind closed doors, you know, like the CCU, a good example, if they met behind closed doors and handed out huge raises, including to the 2 lawyers who were supposed to advise them, you can't do this, guys. So I hope that because the Attorney General got burned on this case, they don't say, well, they don't become what's called gun shy, that they're afraid to tackle any open government law violations in the future. Now, the 3 defendants who didn't go on trial but were dismissed, I suppose the Attorney General made a value judgment and said, well, if we couldn't win the first case, the chances of us winning the second one are not going to be great, because some of the stuff from the first trial will be harmful to our case in the second trial. So better to dismiss it to run away today and live to fight another day. Now, as far as those that were declared not guilty, I just have a few things that I would throw in here. And as I said, I have not read the pleadings in this case. I have not read jury instructions. I didn't attend a single hearing. All I know is what I read about these cases in the newspaper. But I would say that if someone asked me, how do you think the jury acquitted in that case, my answer would be this. There was evidence that lawyers had advised the Gura board that what they did was not illegal, that they could do the polling, and that they could have the meetings in private, and it was not illegal. Well, that's not a sufficient defense at law. You know, if you go in a trial and say, yeah, I did what you said, I killed a guy over there, but my lawyer said it was okay, that's not a defense. And if you stop and think about it, you could understand why. If that were the law, then the aim would be to find lawyers who would give you advice that you could use as a defense when you get caught. That's just not the law. But I think it's very difficult for the average jury to convict someone who makes a credible case that he was following lawyers' advice and that he didn't put any money in his pocket because of it, which may have very well have been the case here. The second thing that I think hurt the government was their star witness, Marcel Camacho. Marcel Camacho testified that when the decision on the tax credits was first discussed, he stormed out of the meeting, and he never talked about it after that. And then a tape is played that showed that the next day at the board meeting, he talked for 15 minutes, told a few jokes, etc. So one of the mechanics of credibility is this, that there is the mechanism of impeachment. So if a witness says, you know, if you catch a witness being untruthful about a relevant matter, the jury is entitled, you're entitled to a jury instruction that says that you are entitled to disbelieve anything that witness said. Now, I don't know if there was a jury instruction like that or not, but it's just human nature. If a person says, you know, I'm always down at the Hilton on Christmas Eve every year. I never miss Christmas Eve at the Hilton. And I know for a fact that the guy was at my house last year. After that, I'm going to be a little bit doubtful about, you know, some of the things that person says. Prior inconsistent statements. So when Marcel Camacho, that tape was played back, I suspect that what went through the juror's mind was, you know, none of the stuff that he says is very believable. And I do believe that lawyers advised these people to do what they did, and they thought it was okay. They didn't intentionally break the law. Now, there's something called jury nullification. Jury nullification means that sometimes juries will acquit a defendant even though he's guilty of the crime that he's charged with. And they acquit the defendant because they don't like, for several reasons. One, they don't like the way the prosecutor handled the case. Two, they think the law is unjust. Three, there were extenuating circumstances so that the the defendant shouldn't have to suffer. So jury nullification is not held in high regard by the judicial establishment because it's a deviation from the way trials are supposed to go. Defense counsel, of course, are very good at conducting their case in chief and their cross-examination to raise the possibility that the jury would say, yeah, I think that probably these people did what they were accused of doing, but I can't see that we should convict them, even if they did it. I'm not going to vote for conviction. That could have been the case when the jurors said, well, yeah, maybe they did that. Maybe they did the polling in the secret meeting. But they were acting on the advice of government lawyers. So how can we convict them when they thought that they were doing the legal thing? That's what I would call my horseback analysis of the entire matter, with all of the caveats that I mentioned to you. Okay, the next item on the card is Gura Commissioners versus Topaznia. Ray Topaznia was the director of Gura during the end of the Calvo administration, and he has brought a suit against the commissioners of Gura in their official capacities, not their personal capacities. And here's the article from the Post. Incumbent commissioners of the Guam Housing and Urban Renewal Authority have jointly filed a request for the district court to dismiss a whistleblower lawsuit filed by Gura Executive Director Ray Topaznia involving alleged fraudulent activities Topaznia raised during his previous role as Gura's chief years ago under a different administration. Gura Commissioners Sabino Flores, Monica Guzman, Carl Dominguez, George Pareda, and Joseph M. Leon Guerrero filed a motion Tuesday in federal court. They were not yet on the Gura board when the alleged fraud arose at the Federal Housing Agency, which offers public housing units and rent vouchers to thousands of families. So if that's the case, why are they the named defendants? And the answer is this, that one who would sue a government agency, you can't really sue the government unless you go through the Government Claims Act. You can sue officials of the government in their official capacity. So if you sue a board member in his official capacity, that means no money's going to come out of his pocket if the case goes the wrong way. But the case has to be brought against the commissioners, and almost always in the names of the commissioners. The rules of civil procedure, Rule 25D, says that when a public officer is a party to an action in an official capacity and during its pendency dies, resigns, or otherwise ceases to hold office, the action does not abate, and the officer's successor is automatically substituted as a party. Proceedings following the substitution shall be in the name of the substitute party, but any misnomer not affecting substantial rights shall be disregarded. An order of substitution may be entered at any time. So, under Rule 25, when okay, got to take a break, huh, Real Joe Cruz? Okay, I'll come back to Gura versus the Gura Commissioners case here right after this break.
Life happens. You need to go to work. The kids need to go to school. There are family events, friend events, any event, and everyone needs to communicate. When you need mobile services that you know you can rely on, choose GTA. As the winner of Ookla's 2019 award for Best Mobile Coverage on Guam, you can rely on us to offer you better plans to modernize your life, fit your needs, and keep you connected. So visit us today and let us help you connect. GTA, we start with you.
Hey, what's that?
A Subway Big Hot Pastrami?
My big hot pastrami?
No, my Subway Big Hot Pastrami. Get your own.
Get your own Subway Big Hot Pastrami. Tender, juicy beef on freshly baked sunflower crunch bread, topped with pickles and mustard. Finish off your meal with all new seasoned potato wedges, baked to perfection right in the restaurant. Both available for a limited time only. Subway, make it what you want.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
Okay, so that's how these people who were not on the Board of Commissioners at the time that what the matter that Topaznia complained about took place. But because of the way the rules of civil procedure are set up, the case was against the commissioners in their official capacity. The new commissioners are now the named defendants. It doesn't mean that they're going to have to pony up any money, etc. Now, Joseph Cameron, when a motion was filed and he saw his name as a defendant, he quit. He said, I didn't do anything wrong. I wasn't even on the board at that time. I'm out of here. You know, maybe Joseph, well, I guess I hadn't commented on Rule 25 on Tall Tales, so I suppose he could possibly be excused there. But sometimes a little knowledge can be a dangerous thing. So the incumbent commissioners contend that Topaznia failed to state a claim upon which relief can be granted under the False Claims Act. So Topaznia filed a case in district court, a federal case, under the False Claims Act, also known as a key tam action. The Gura commissioners also said Topaznia failed to provide specific details of the alleged fraud. The Ninth Circuit has ruled in another case that whistleblower plaintiffs involved in what's called key tam actions are supposedly privy to the alleged fraud, and therefore the whistleblowers have adequate knowledge to plead matters with sufficient particularity, the commissioners contend. In a key tam action, a private party brings a case on the government's office, as it were, the government's behalf, according to Cornell University's website. Topaznia's lawsuit alleged he was fired from being executive director of Gura during Eddie Calvo's administration in November 2012 after Topaznia allegedly opposed payments to Mark Smith, who was a brother-in-law of Calvo at the time, court documents state. Topaznia alleged he opposed payments to Smith while Smith was legal counsel of Gura and at the same time a landlord to some of Gura's federally funded Section 8 housing program tenants. Section 8 tenants get federally funded rent vouchers. A conflict of interest rule by the U.S. Housing and Urban Renewal Department, which is the provider of Gura's housing funds, forbade Smith from being a landlord to the agency he represents. The federal government has alleged in a related action, in a related civil case. Federal prosecutors filed a separate civil case that alleges Smith received a total of $281,131 in rent payments as a landlord under Section 8 between March 16, 2012 and May 2, 2014 through a friend of Smith, Glenn Wong. For the period of his service as Gura's legal counsel from March 11, 2012 to May 2013, Smith received $197,777 for legal services, the federal lawsuit alleges. The federal lawsuit asked to triple the damages Smith owes to the federal government, which would be the rent and the legal fees times 3. Okay, so we're coming up on that big halftime show that you've all been waiting for. The marching bands, the drill teams, the sword swallowers, the cheerleaders, etc. So we're going to break for about 7 minutes here for the big halftime show on Tall Tales. And then I'll come back with Gura Commissioners versus Topaznia. And then after that, the last item on my card is Moylan versus the Gullible. See you then.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM, and 104.3 HD3.
Next impeachment hearing is scheduled. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. The House Judiciary Committee announcing Tuesday it will pick up the impeachment inquiry with a hearing next Wednesday. Committee Chairman Jerry Nadler writing President Trump asking who will represent him in those hearings. That's a departure from the Intelligence Committee hearings in which the president was not permitted to have counsel represent him. The president tweeting Tuesday he'd love to have Mike Pompeo, Rick Perry, Mick Mulvaney, and others testify about what he's called the phony impeachment hoax. Then in a rally near Miami Tuesday night, the president predicting impeachment will cost the Democrats.
The crazy Democrats are going down in a landslide, and that landslide is going to start right here in the great state of Florida.
Both sides asking for a sentencing delay in the case of former presidential aide Michael Flynn.
Federal prosecutors and President Trump's former national security advisor Michael Flynn have filed a joint motion asking to postpone Flynn's sentencing until after the public sees the DOJ Inspector General Michael Horowitz's report on the FBI's handling of the 2016 Russia investigation. That review is due December 9th, with Flynn's sentencing set for December 18th. Both sides argue Horowitz's report is likely to examine topics related to Flynn's claim that federal investigators altered key evidence and coerced him into a guilty plea.
That's Fox's Sean Lanchill in Washington. Severe storms in many parts of the country tonight. A strong tornado is reported to have touched down southeast of Jackson, Mississippi. There are trees blown down and some structures reported to have been damaged. Tornado warnings now stretch into southwest Alabama. A winter storm is stretching from central Nebraska to Michigan's Upper Peninsula, making driving there treacherous as well. New records Tuesday on Wall Street. The Dow gaining 55 points, NASDAQ up 15, the S&P 500 closing 7 points higher. America is listening to Fox News.
Ever notice how that one perfect holiday gift is just out of reach? Or how sales on the stuff you want all come at the same time? This season, plan ahead with a holiday loan from First Hawaiian Bank. Now you can afford to be nice without being naughty. For more details, visit FHB.com or any branch to apply. Additional restrictions apply. First Hawaiian Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
Here at The Point, we're thankful for a lot of things. Our awesome sponsors.
An island brimming full of people with pride and passion.
And a perfect place to do business.
But when we reflect on it,
we're most thankful to have you listening.
And this seemed like a good time to let you know. We hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
And thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening to 93.3 The Point.
Santa Barbara County, California, the sheriff's office issuing evacuation warnings for people living below the Cave wildfire. Heavy rains in the forecast could trigger mudslides. As to the fire itself,
fire has moved down. It's been a steady progression. It was pushed down canyon. Fire has jumped the Highway 154 and burning down into an area called San Antonio Creek.
That's Mike Eliason of the Santa Barbara County Fire Department. As many as 5,000 people have already been evacuated because of the fire. Federal judge in Oregon granting a preliminary injunction blocking a Trump administration proclamation that would require immigrants to show proof of health care to get a visa.
Oregon U.S. District Court Judge Michael Simon ruled that a pending decision on the constitutionality should keep the State Department from enforcing the policy. It was scheduled to take effect December 1st. The matter is currently winding its way through the courts. This preliminary injunction comes after a lawsuit filed earlier this month saying as many as 2/3 of all legal immigrants outside the U.S. seeking visas would be affected by the order President Trump signed in October.
Fox's Gernal Scott, not counting that big meal you're about to eat this week. A new report says old age may be getting shorter.
The average life expectancy of an American used to be increasing, and as of 2014, we lived to be an average of 78.9 years. But that age is dropping as people die sooner because of the opioid crisis and higher suicide rates. Now the average American's expected to live to be 78.6 years. Researchers from the Virginia Commonwealth University School of Medicine looked specifically at midlife mortality rates and found the biggest increase of people dying at middle age were in New England and the Ohio Valley. The largest increases in midlife mortality happened among adults living in rural areas. Jill Nato, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
When you think about better water, think Kinetico softened water. Kinetico water conditioners work like no other, supplying a continuous flow of luxuriously soft water without disruption and without use of electricity. After all, better water flows from better thinking. Kinetico.
American Water Tech, a passion for improving lives through better water. Call American Water Tech at 649-2301 or email info@americanwatertech.com.
In life, we all have the ability to make a difference, to make an impact on someone's life. As we look around us, time never stops, but we are filled with endless moments of gratitude. The art of giving is incorporated in so many different ways. At Guam Gift Baskets, we want to be able to express your gratitude and love to those who you care about. Show your appreciation with a gift made with love this holiday season. Visit our website at guamgiftbaskets.com. See the smiles, touch their hearts, feel the experience.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
Another one of those great halftime shows here on Tall Tales. Completely enjoyable. It's always an inspiration to me to listen to that music at the end of the big halftime show, especially the Cannon Fire. And during the time that you were enjoying the halftime show, I took a peek at Facebook postings, and I found the one that I wanted to mention earlier. It's from Gus Castro Jasongas. I remember back in the day, anonymous tips or other would never make it to print since its source is unnamed. And that's what I've been screaming about. It's irresponsible to run these things when you don't know where they came from. And I think I made a pretty good case that the media has empowered people with improper motives to make it really difficult for government officials just by sending in an anonymous scandal sheet. Now, newspapers do from time to time run stories where they don't identify the source. They mention that they have sources and they explain why the name of the source cannot be disclosed. But they have the name and they've talked with the source and they have determined on their own that there's validity to what the source has said. Unlike this situation where apparently, oh, we got an anonymous letter. Yeah, we can make that into 3 stories. What does it say? Oh, okay, good. And then our governor picking it up and validating it, say, well, yeah, I gave it to the adjutant general for her to work through. Well, if it were a serious complaint and not this anonymous stuff, and the matters in the letter were serious, the charges were serious, and they are concerning the adjutant general herself, General Agagi, would she be the person that you'd want to investigate the charges against her? I've got really serious charges against Esther Agagi, and they come from a credible person. And I've done a brief inquiry, and it seems there's validity to these charges. So I want something to be, I want this to be investigated in the Guard. So who should I give it to? I know, I'll give it to the person that the complaint alleges has committed misconduct. Because who would know better what the misconduct was than the person who did it? This should make for a much more thorough investigation. And of course, this is once again reminiscent of Pika Fairran and the investigation that the Chamorro Land Trust Board did on the Chamorro Land Trust. They said nobody did anything wrong. How did we have all of those problems? We had a member of an employee from the land trust confess to official misconduct on TV. Oh, nobody did anything wrong. We did an investigation and nothing bad happened. So this anonymous letter thing and the way it was handled by the governor doesn't make it for two reasons. One, it allows the publication of spurious charges with no independent safeguard that the charges are true. But moving beyond that, if the charges are true, then who would be the one to determine what to do with the charges? The person that's accused, of course. So what was that word that I used yesterday? Kakistocracy, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, a government people by the least capable citizens available. And that's more and more what this administration is turning out to be. I do have to say something, though. You know, here we are on the night before Thanksgiving, and I have not heard that Friday is going to be a government of Guam holiday.
No, I don't believe it will be.
You don't?
I think people are encouraged to sign leave if they wish to have that day off.
Well, I hope that we don't have a last minute. Let's help people stay with their families. So if Lou sticks with that policy throughout her administration, that'll be one thing that she's done right. I'm going to be watching. Okay, next we have Moylan versus the Gullible. And this worked really well for Jim Moylan. There's a story on PNC. Bill levels playing field for independent candidates with the intent of creating a level playing field for those individuals seeking to run as an independent candidate for a partisan office. Senator James C. Moylan introduced Bill 254-35 on Tuesday. The legislation proposes some sweeping changes. I guess I don't recognize a broom when I see one because I read the bill and I didn't see any sweeping changes in the bill. I'll get to kind of a section-by-section analysis here soon. The legislation proposes some sweeping changes to amend archaic laws that create many challenges for any individual who opts to run under an independent designation, particularly with emphasizing that any independent candidate should not be characterized as a candidate under a recognized political party. Well, hello, that's not what the law calls for now. There's a section, the separate part of the law that deals with independent candidates and another section that deals with independent political or new political parties. And if you want to run as an independent, the recognized political party stuff has nothing at all to do with you. Okay, Bill 254-35 proposes to, 1, define an independent candidate as an individual who is elected not to run under the affiliation of a recognized political party, therefore would not be subject to fill the requirements that such political parties must file with the Election Commission, which is the law right now, by the way. This includes having a specific percentage of votes in the previous general election to maintain their status as a recognized party. Stop and think about that. If I wanted to run as an independent now, I would have to show that I received a certain amount of support in the last general election. It's one of those things where you can't get there from here. An independent candidate who fulfills all the general requirements requested of candidates running for that specific office shall have the right to place, now here's where Moylan does it right, shall have the right to place their name on the ballot. Now, I don't know if it's Moylan or PNC, Instead of using, we talk about archaic, instead of using this archaic, he or she shall have the right to place, shall have the right to place his or her name on the ballot. We use their, Real Joe Cruz. That's the way to do it, right? Yeah. Further, a column shall be established on a ballot for any official independent candidate. An independent candidate or group will not be categorized as a political party, hence would not be subject to the requirements set forth for groups attempting to form a new party, which, again, is the law right now. Independent candidates who are on a ballot would be subject to the same minimum vote requirements as those recognized in a recognized political party. Presently, an independent designated individual would be required to attain a minimum of 20% of the total votes cast versus their counterparts in the Democrat and Republican parties who are required to attain just 4%. Personally, it seems that our laws have been created to deny an independent candidate from advancing to the general election, which is why we introduced Bill 254 so that there is a level playing field for individuals carrying different ideologies. We live in an era where entering public service should not necessarily be which party you follow or wish to follow, but it should be about what you offer or bring to the table. All very high-sounding terms. Parties play a valuable role in our society, but an individual who seeks to run without a political affiliation should be afforded some rights, the same rights to advance in an election as one who runs as a Democrat or Republican. Senator Moylan has stated that he will proudly continue to run as a Republican, but hopes if this bill passed would encourage those individuals who are not comfortable running under the banner of a political party to run as independent candidates. So let me just take a peek at some of the provisions of this statute, of this bill that would become statutory if the bill passed. I start out at the back, and yesterday I gave you some tips when reading a bill to know if the person who drafted the bill knew what he was doing. And here we are. Section 11, effective date. This act shall become effective upon enactment. A waste of ink. Title I of the Government Code says exactly that. So this is a waste of ink. It shows that the person who drafted the bill didn't know what he was doing. The only time that you'd have a section for an effective date is if you don't want the bill to become effective midnight the day the governor signed it, the veto was overridden, or whatever. Sometimes bills pass and you don't want them to become effective for a period of time. So you could have a section that said effective date. This act shall become effective 60 days after enactment. Then it makes sense. But the way this one is worded, the act shall become effective upon enactment is silly. And then we've got Section 10, the obligatory severability clause. If any provision of this act or its application to any person or circumstance is found to be invalid or contrary to law, such invalidity shall not affect other provisions or applications of this act that can be given effect without the invalid provision or application. And to this end, the provisions of this act are severable. Well, that sounds so intellectual, doesn't it, Real Joe Cruz?
It does, sir.
Yeah, but it's just balderdash. You know, if this, there are times when a statute that was part of a single bill is challenged based on constitutionality or some other grounds. And when a court looks at it, the court has to decide, would the legislature have passed this bill without the section that we're holding unconstitutional? Would they have passed it anyhow? If the answer is yes, then that section is severable. If the answer is no, it ain't. It's just that simple. So this is another one of those whole, everybody knows that you've got to put a severability clause in a bill and an effective date in a bill. Everybody knows that. It's just like everybody knows that the world is flat and that heavier objects heavier than air cannot fly, and on and on and on. So the statute has some really nice legislative findings and intent, which is what I think most of the reporters read. They think by reading that, they will know what the bill is about. And there's really, first of all, there's no requirement that a bill have a legislative findings and intent. And second, there's no requirement that that legislative findings and requirement actually relates to the content of the bill. So Moylan starts out Section 2. He adds a new 1112.1, independent candidates. For the purpose of Title III, Guam Code annotated, an independent candidate shall be a candidate for any office, etc., who is not elected to run under the affiliation of a recognized political party. Well, that's the law already. So he's added something that's about as useful as the effective date section. And then the next one, Section 3, he adds this: this provision shall not apply to any independent candidates. And this is, in addition to other rights accorded in this title to a political party, a recognized political party shall have a right to place on the ballot in any election to have the names of its candidates identified thereon with the party's name. And any recognized political party which fails to poll in any general election the percentage of total votes cast as required by Section 1112C shall lose its status as a recognized political party and shall be denied a place upon the ballot unless it complies with the provisions of Section 112. And Moylan adds this provision shall not apply to any independent candidate, etc. Well, it doesn't apply anyhow. And then C, notwithstanding any other provisions of the law, any independent candidate who submits all requirements pursuant to Chapter 6 of Title III, Guam Code annotated, shall have the right to place, guess what, Real Joe Cruz?
I'm not sure, sir.
There.
Shall
have the right to place their name. So, once again, notwithstanding any other provision of law, any independent candidate who submits all requirements pursuant to Chapter 6 shall have the right to place their name on the ballot in any election. So I guess this section is limited only to candidates who happen to be Siamese twins. Of course, I can't use that either. It's racist. Conjoined twins. So that's good, Jim. You've empowered the conjoined twin population on the island. And once again, this adds nothing to the law. Then we've got Section 4, formation of new political parties. And it talks how to form a new political party. And then Moylan adds this provision shall not apply to any independent candidate. Well, it didn't apply anyhow because an independent candidate is not a new political party. And then order of names on the ballot, more of the same. And then we've got party to be represented by whom? Not less than 90 days before the holding of a primary, each party seeking ballot placement shall submit to the commission a list of its officers and central committee. And Moylan adds this provision shall not apply to any independent candidate. Of course not. All right, somebody's calling. Maybe it's Jim Moylan calling in here to straighten me out.
Oh, the call dropped. Oh, there it is again.
All right. 6, 8, all right. So going on, and then a section about vacancies not to be filled, more of the same, form of the primary election ballot. Moylan adds one word or column, 2 words. There shall appear specific instructions in boldface type on each ballot that a voter may cast votes under one party or column only. Now that's the rub. So in a primary, you can vote for Democrat or Republican or Independent, but that's it. And I'll come back to that. So these sections of the bill really mean nothing. What happened to our call, Real Joe Cruz?
It dropped. I have no idea. Maybe they'll call back.
All right. Okay, so we've got, and then he adds a section 15404 A, he amends, dealing with the governor. Now, for the sake of brevity, I'll leave that out.
There's a call, sir.
Okay. I'll just wait to see who I'm going to be talking to here. Frank. Okay. Well, I'm ready for a frank discussion on this matter, Frank.
We hung up again.
Hmm.
Maybe it's an anonymous caller.
Maybe when I said his name, maybe that scared him off, huh? Okay, if you want to call anonymously, just tell Real Joe Cruz that your name is anonymous, and he'll let you on the air that way. Okay, so then we come down to some of the one really important thing on this bill, and that is the winners in all other partisan or non-affiliated primary contests shall be candidates receiving the highest number of votes. And then he strikes out this language, except that no candidate running in the independent column shall be eligible for general election ballot placement unless he or she receives votes equal to at least 10% of the total number of the invalid votes, of the valid votes cast for the office for which he is a candidate. Now that perhaps is an impediment to getting on the ballot if you are an independent. You got to have at least 10% votes equal to 10% of the ballots cast. So he's striking that, and that in place of that he adds this: as long as the votes they receive, we're talking about an independent candidate, are pursuant to the minimum requirements stipulated in section 15109. And I have 15109, and it reads like this: no person shall be deemed nominated in a primary election unless the candidate receives votes at least 3 times greater than the required number of signatures needed for a nomination petition for candidacy for such election, or votes equal to 4% of the total number of persons who obtain ballots to vote in that primary election for all parties, whichever is less. So, in other words, you got to get 750 votes in the primary if you want to see your name on the ballot, on the general election ballot. This is impossible. And Jim Moylan has done nothing to help independent candidates. He's done something to help Jim Moylan because he got some really good press out of here. He's got a nice picture of himself in the PNC article. But it does nothing to help the independent candidate. And I've explained this before, but we'll go through it again. When you go to the primary election, you can vote Democrat or Republican. So let's say when you're voting for senator, you really like 14 of the Democrats. You got to use your imagination on this one, right? You really like 14 of the Democrats, but there's one you really don't like at all. But when you look at the Republican side, there's one Republican you really, really like. So you vote 14 Democrats and 1 Republican. What happens? You have spoiled your ballot because you've got to vote all Democrat or all Republican. You can't cross over. Your vote would not count. That's why it's called a partisan primary. The purpose of the partisan primary is to determine who the candidates will be for a general election. So under the current setup, let's say that Real Joe Cruz wanted to run as an independent. It's probably not a very good example because if he did, he would be such a shoo-in that it'd hardly be necessary to count the votes. But let's say that happened. So the Real Joe Cruz, the Real Joe Cruz is on the ballot, and the Democrat candidates and the Republican candidates on the ballot. And I'll explain what happens to the real Joe Cruz right after I talk to another Joe, but I got to take a break here for the seventh inning stretch, Joe. So we're going to do the seventh inning stretch, and then I'll come back to you. Not the real Joe Cruz, Joe, but another Joe. Okay.
GRMC's Neuroscience and Neurology Department treats a wide spectrum of disorders associated with the nervous system, spine, and brain. Some of the more common disorders include seizures, epilepsy, dementia, sleep disorders, migraine, and stroke, which is one of the leading causes of death on Guam. GRMC's neuroscience team is equipped with the latest technology and the finest neurological doctors. To make an appointment, contact GRMC Specialty Clinics at 645-5500.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Talk Tells with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Mescla. Try their featured special for November. Pork belly and French toast. Crispy pork belly strips served over lightly battered brioche. Raspberry demi-glaze and topped with maple syrup. Visit Mescla in Agotna and now in Tumon at the Grand Plaza Hotel. For reservations, please call 969-2652.
Yeah, the old seventh inning stretch, Wrigley Field, Chicago, Illinois. Doesn't get any better than that. I hope everybody got a chance to engage in the seventh inning stretch here. We're coming down. We got about a half an hour of Tall Tales to go. And as per my promise before the break, I'm going to talk to another Joe. Hello, Joe.
Hey there. How's it going there, Uncle Bob?
Good.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Oh, thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving to you and the real Joe there.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if I'm coming in loud and clear, but what seems to be the case is that everyone feels as though that they want to enact changes through elections, yet they still seem to be going about the same way, meaning that they elect people to worry about issues for them, and they don't follow up and keep track of the issues that they wanted to be taken care of. So I bring that up because the question gets to be, what does the majority seem to want as far as changes? I mean, you got so many perspectives. Like, even if the majority say, yeah, we want to balance the budget, right? There's going to be so many different opinions on how to do that. And in the end of the day, right, somehow or another, the budget does not get balanced. And then they start pointing fingers. So how do we fact check? And so this is why I'm glad you bring this issue up there about as far as what is meaningful and what is just not necessarily meaningless, but waste of ink, as you say.
Mm-hmm.
Because what is it that really has to occur for people to be allowed to have their name on the ballot? It has to do with reform, I guess, with the Guam Election Commission, and they have to ask the question of the Guam Election Commission, whoever chairs it, how can we get more names on the ballot that don't have affiliation with either political party?
Well,
necessarily.
I understand, Joe, but the Election Commission would not be the right folks to ask, because half of the members of the Election Commission come from one party or the other. They're Democrats or Republicans. So
there's the dilemma, and yet people will claim as though they want changes, but they don't seem to act as though they want changes. Otherwise, you would find a way to put names on the ballot other than saying, well, write in your own name. So, and even so, the use of having names printed on the ballot is it's kind of a last minute form of advertising. If people who didn't keep up with all the advertising, because for one reason or another, or maybe there wasn't enough, they didn't have the money for advertising. If they show up at the right moment where people are paying attention on election day, or where their signs are visible, they might improve their. I'm not an expert, just possibly improve their odds of getting a few more votes. But I think it's a real study. I don't know if the media is the right organization to do this study, or the RAND. What do you call it, the RAND Corporation? They do polls.
How about the Tall Tales think tank, Joe?
There you go, the Tall Tales think tank.
Yeah,
the Tall Tales Nation could definitely bring up these issues more often as to what is what. What is really of significance, and what is just, as you say, wasted ink.
Obviously, the media is not up to the job. Witness this PNC, this PNC News puff piece about Moylan. I mean,
like you said, it's his. So he might be a nice guy for impressions, but really it mostly helps him if it does not help to get others' names on the ballot.
Correct.
Can we agree on that? Yeah, I think even Senator Moylan would agree. If his legislation they did a study and say, well, your legislation didn't help to get additional names on the ballot, then he would have to agree and admit, okay, maybe we can do better in this. Otherwise, so then this is why I like you talking about the Tall Tales there, Bob, because you're helping us not to have to go through the hard lesson way. You know what I'm saying? Most people, the school of hard knocks, you have to learn the hard way. But you're bringing this wisdom, and I'm not just brown nosing here. You know what I'm saying? Honestly, you're bringing up these issues that we can address and help to not have to go and do it the hard way. And you give the good, as you say, you might have a few good points. I forget how you said it, talking points, but doesn't necessarily mean you have is it a good argument or you win the argument?
Well, I really appreciate your remarks there, Joe, and you might.
Thanks for your time there, Kabab, and I'll just I'll listen to more of the details about how we can. I think the bottom line is getting more names on the ballot, whether it be independents or So thanks a lot. I'll keep listening. Maybe we can come up with some ideas, and people maybe call in with ideas and otherwise. Okay. Happy Thanksgiving again.
Same to you, Joe. So long. Yes, another Joe. Joe, I know you're still listening, so I'm going to encourage you to write an anonymous letter too. Kind of like the anonymous letter I read at the beginning of the program. You seem to have mastered all of the key words. Anyhow. This was a real success for Moylan because he got some good press out of it. And it once again shows that news media is if the news media were going to engage in a sport, it would probably be softball, because there's nothing but softballs in this puff piece about Jim Moylan. So going back to analyzing the bill, the winners in all partisan primary contests shall be candidates receiving the highest number of votes, as long as the votes they receive are pursuant to the minimum requirements in Section 15109. And for ease of discussion, that's 750 votes. So let's say that Real Joe Cruz is on the ballot, right? And
yes, I am.
And everybody who listens to Tall Tales says, man, if there's anybody I'm going to vote for, it's going to be the Real Joe Cruz.
Vote for me.
So they go in there and they see independent, one name, Real Joe Cruz. And then they see Democrat, governor, senator, mayor, public auditor, on and on and on. And then the instruction says you could only vote in one column. So the voter says, do I really want to vote for real Joe Cruz and not vote for any of these other offices?
Absolutely.
Well, I said I shouldn't have used you as a case because it's too easy, right? But the voters are not going to do that. They're not going to vote for an independent candidate in the primary because they can't vote for anything else. And anybody who's studied the phenomenon understands that. So we'll never have a independent candidate on the general election ballot, even if it wouldn't matter who it was. People are not going to forswear their ability to vote for other candidates to vote for that one candidate. So, and that's, notwithstanding the really nice language in Moylan's statement of legislative findings and his make work and going through and adding and amending sections of the law that really don't make any difference, there's no there. The whole bill is not a good use of ink. So if you want to make it possible for independents to run in a general election, there are ways to do it, but this is not the way to do it. And do us a favor, Senator Jim Moylan, don't try to fool us like this anymore into thinking that you have actually solved the problem when you haven't. So that's pretty much that portion of the card. Moylan versus the gullible, and I guess the most gullible would be the folks over at PNC. And, of course, a lot of people say, well, Moylan's standing up for independent candidates. How do you know that? Well, I saw it on TV. So, obviously, it's true, right? I think, do you want to, yeah, if I could run as an independent and not have to run as a Democrat or Republican, I'd do it. I hope Moylan's bill passes. Yeah, I'm going to vote for him next time because I really like, yeah. Hello. So going back to some of the things that another Joe raised, this is my suggestion to the population. This is what I want to see our government do. I want to see an effective, efficient government that provides basic services in accordance with the rule of law on at least a break-even basis. Now, when we all agree to that, and of course you always have people in the electorate who say, well, yeah, but I like free stuff. And so, the Democrats are going to give us more free stuff than the Republicans, so I'm going to vote for the Democrats. That's kind of been the history of the bipartisan thing for a long, long time. Not that the Republicans are lily white either, or bad choice of words.
I didn't hear it, sir.
Yeah, not that the Republicans are free from sin themselves. Yeah. In that regard, the free stuff regard. So that's kind of the tension, that in order to get elected, you kind of got to promise, somebody has to promise people free stuff because it's very compelling. Yeah, I'm going to vote for these guys. And of course, I've gone into this before. The basic difference between a conservative and a liberal or a lefty is this. A conservative says the government's job is to secure and protect the individual rights of the citizens so that they can enjoy freedom. The Democrats' approach is the job of the government is to make people's lives better. And when you get about 2 paragraphs into the page, and the way you make people's lives better is by giving them free stuff. And who's going to pay for the free stuff? Yeah, you, me, the taxpayers. So income redistribution is really necessary when it comes to giving people free stuff in order to make people's lives better. Where conservative says, if you want a better life, work on it. Work on yourself and work on your life. Don't expect the government to do it for you. So as far as our legislature is concerned, right now being a senator is a job. It pays $55,000. The WADPAT 10 got it all the way up to 80 for a while before they got booted out of office. But it's a job, and people want to hang on to that job and all of the perks, you know, the ability to show up for social functions 15 minutes late and make a grand entrance so that the master of ceremonies will say, oh, and now I want to take this opportunity to welcome Senator Smucker Huckowitz. A round of applause. You know, that kind of goes with the office, right? And in some case, and to have a lush office at taxpayer expense, and to put different kinds of folks on the payroll, manservants, maidservants, chauffeurs, etc. Some folks run for senator, not because they want to be senator, but because they want to be prince or princess, and we don't elect those around here, but senator's the next best thing. And people who are elected senator oftentimes don't ever want to give it up. They want to hang on to it forever. So they'll structure all their affairs around the idea, I got to get reelected. I got to stay in office. Until we get rid of the legislature as a job, things are really not going to change. The high hopes that senators will act in the public interest probably won't happen. What we need is a legislature that meets a couple times a year, that's not made up of professional politicians, of just ordinary folks who want to come in for a couple times a year, go into panic overdrive, keep their jobs, be senators, enact good laws, and go back to work. Because the way it is now, in order to be a senator, for most folks, you kind of got to give up whatever your career is. There have been some exceptions. Randy Cunliffe ran for senator and kept his law practice going. He was a pretty good senator. I'm probably going to get in trouble with Republicans for saying that, but, you know, truth be told, he was a pretty good senator, and he's been a very successful lawyer, so it can be done. And we've had a few others. Now, back in the old days, we had a butcher. That would have been Leonard Paulino, who had a store in Sinahanya. What was the name of that store in Sinahanya? Leonard's Market. Yeah. We had a baker, Tommy Tanaka. We did not have a candlestick maker, right? We had people from all walks of life who came down and spent their time as senators, a few lawyers, etc. But they didn't have to give up their careers, and they didn't face the possibility that when they lost an election, they'd be sitting on the curb out in front of the legislature wondering, gosh, how am I going to pay my bills now? So until we get to that point, it's going to be pretty easy to be a talk show host, because there are going to be so many issues, like this one with Moylan's feel-good bill today. There are going to be so many issues to talk about. So that kind of winds it up for Joe Cruz, or for Joe, also known as Another Joe. I've come to the end of the card, so I guess we're just 2 minutes away from the home stretch, huh, real Joe Cruz? Yeah. Well, I'm going to go back to my default topics then and fill up the rest of the time before the end of the program. I guess what I ought to do is cruise through the comments on Facebook before I do that. I think there's some pretty good ones here. Carl Bora Nelson, half a day, Bob. I'm thankful for Tall Tales and the TT International Truth Posse. Where would Guam be without you all? Then Andrew Bainham, with all of the anonymous, could this mean there's a climate of fear in the government? Andre, no, it doesn't mean there's a climate of fear in the government. It means that there are clever people who have figured out how they can put one over on their director and not have to take any responsibility for it at all. And thanks to the way the media handle these things, by submitting an anonymous complaint, it has far more power than one that's actually signed. So no, it doesn't mean intimidation. Okay, we're going to take a break. And then after the break, I'm going to talk with Pete. So Pete after the break. Let me repeat. First the break, then Pete. I'm not going to repeat that.
As the busy holiday season approaches, the last thing on your mind is to visit your medical provider. At American Medical Center, we put your health first. A preventative visit will ensure a healthy holiday season. Call 647-8262, and together we can address any concerns you may have and make certain all your medications are current. From our family to yours, happy holidays from American Medical Center, your partner in healthcare.
Are you ready for some football? The Ray Gibson Show has got your fix every day with the Points NFL Pick'em contest. Get the latest updates as we check out the past week's performance and break down the upcoming action. Get your game on by calling the hotline at 888-TALK or sound off on Facebook Live at thepoint.gu. League members get a chance to win some awesome weekly prizes with a shot for your choice of a new GTA phone. The NFL Pick'em contest is brought to you by Current Guam with special thanks to GTA.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
Okay, the call to the post. Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky. That means that I've got about 9 more minutes of Tall Tales to go, and then me and my cough can go home. And my cough can take over and do its trick at my house instead of on the air. Okay, so as I announced and repeated before the break, I'm going to talk with Pete right now. Good afternoon, Pete.
Hey, Uncle Bob, how you doing? Welcome back.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll try to be frank, but not as frank as Frank was earlier.
Okay.
Yeah. What do you think about that? The section, I don't know. I didn't catch the whole your whole monologue, I guess, about the election reform proposals. But what do you think about the section where you have to use your birth certificate legal name and no nicknames?
Yeah, that's all right. I think that's okay.
But that's part of the character of this place, you know. People use nicknames. That's how people are known.
Yeah, utungo na
behind that.
Utungo na naan familia.
Yeah.
Sa bulan na tautono guahan naan pareho na naan ki otro na tauto. So, you know, how many Joe Cruzes are there? How many hundreds of Joe Cruzes are there? That's why we only employ the real Joe Cruz here. So that's why you find
he wouldn't be able to be on the ballot as the real Joe Cruz.
So that's why, you know, we would run into things like real Joe, as you were Joe Cruz, Familian Dodu, or all of the colorful. So I understand why it's important, right? But it's also an element of a campaign. But elections. And a ballot is not supposed to be persuasive. It's supposed to be informative. So it's supposed to tell you who the candidate is, not who his family is or who he's related to or any of the other stuff. Just the bare bones, as Joe Friday would say, just the facts. So I think it's okay.
So you're going to be eating turkey tomorrow?
Absolutely. Zahunai, Pablo.
Yeah, you know, a lot of people don't realize, but we do have a lot of turkeys here on Guam.
Yeah, not all of them have wings.
Yeah, and then lastly, what do you know, every time I have to go vote, I get frustrated that I can only vote on one side. You know, and then you see things like folks on one side, they get 14,000 votes, and then they don't make it because they're number 16, and people on the other side made it, and they only got 4,000 votes. That's pretty frustrating. What do you think? Should we be able to cross over? What are your thoughts on that?
No, I don't think so, because remember, the purpose of the primary election is to choose the party's candidates. And I've gotten into this a couple of times with the other Governor Leon Guerrero Ken on the program. If we didn't have primaries, then the candidates would be chosen by the parties. We didn't have primaries until 1970 on Guam. And before that, we had party conventions. So the party bosses in the smoke-filled room would determine who the candidates were going to be and be on the ballot. So around the turn of the last century, reformers in the U.S. said, yeah, we have a general election ballot and we get to vote for those folks, but we don't get the chance, we don't have anything to say about who goes on the ballot. So we get the same old people over and over again. So the primary election was progressive to allow the people to choose the candidates for the party. And I think that's a good system. But I do think we do need to establish a route for an independent to get on the general election ballot without getting 750 votes.
But if you allow the crossover, that's still the people choosing who's going to be on the ballot at the end of the day, correct?
Yeah, but the idea is to choose the party's candidates. It's not a small runoff election. In California, they have a primary, an open primary where you can vote for anybody on either side, and the top two candidates have a runoff. So you could have two Republicans running off against each other. I don't think that's a good idea. I see a value in the party system, and in order for that to survive, we got to keep the primary. Otherwise, you could do away with the primary and just have a signature requirement. Anybody who could gather 1,000 signatures could go on the general election ballot. And then you'd probably have a ballot that's 3 feet long.
Well, in Washington, I think it's the same that like you described about California, where it's the top vote getters from the primary that make it on to the general. Whether it's two Democrats or two Republicans running against each other. But, you know, if it's wide open like that, then that would solve the issue of the independent. They could be on there.
No, because they'd still have to be in a partisan ticket.
Well, if you allow the crossover, then you can vote for anybody, independent, Republican, or Democrat, right?
Well, yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, if you didn't have to if it were no longer a party election, then yeah, if you could vote for Democrat, Republican, or Independent, yeah, that's true.
So you think the party system is actually healthy?
I think we're better off with it than we would be without it.
Why though?
Well, because ideally, we would know about a person's stand on various issues depending on which party he identified with. You know, here on Guam, the Democrats are pro-abortion, and that's important to a lot of people. So, you know, I see that. It's perhaps the issues are not as sharply defined here as they are in some mainland jurisdictions.
There's a lot of blurriness nowadays. You've got conservative Democrats and liberal Republicans.
Well, you know, as far as the mainland is concerned, as far as the Democrats are concerned, there used to be two kinds of Democrats, and they were described by dogs. You had yellow dog Democrats and blue dog Democrats. And a yellow dog Democrat was defined like this: I'm a yellow dog Democrat. I'd vote for a yellow dog if and he were a Democrat. And then you got the blue dog. You had the blue dog Democrats who were moderate Democrats who weren't so strictly stuck with the party's ideology. But the yellow dogs ate the blue dogs up. There are no more blue dog Democrats in the states. And as far as the Republicans are concerned, the old liberal Republicans are gone. The only conservative Republicans and, of course, pro-Trump Republicans. So we don't have that variety in the parties anymore. I gotta go.
All right. Well, thank you for the conversation.
Yeah, I'm glad you called, Pete. Let's repeat this on Friday, okay?
All right, after we've had our turkey.
There you go. Happy Thanksgiving out there in our international radio listening audience. From me and Real Joe Cruz, you want to wish the folks a happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody, from Tall Tales.
From the lips of the Real Joe Cruz. Adios.